Welcome, everybody, to Who's Your Band? We are back here with another new exciting edition. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Mr. Sean Morton. How are you, Sean?
Jeffrey, I am wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing good. I always say I'm excited. I'm always excited to do this show. It's always a fun show. We always have great guests, and today is no exception. Today is no exception because I love this guy. He is one of my favorite comics in New York City. He's so funny. He is a veteran comic, 3 stand-up comedy albums. You've seen him on True TV, Comedy Central. We welcome to the show, Mr. Tom McCaffrey. How are you,
Hello.
Tom?
I'm good. How are you? That was quite an intro. Listen, I was wondering if that was me.
It is. You have quite an extensive resume. Tom comes into a room.
I wish you would tell more people about it.
Yeah, well, if you were around, well, Tom comes into a room and just kind of like hangs out in the back. He don't want to be noticed. He don't want to say anything. Then he goes up on stage and kills every time he goes up. You know,
not quite every time.
Listen, I've never seen you have like a bad set.
Okay, so that's right. Wait, you weren't there Thursday.
Oh, was it bad Thursday?
It was okay. I recorded it. It just wasn't. It wasn't terrible, but they were kind of tough. I think I'm one of those guys that, like, even if I'm kind of doing all right, I feel like I'm doing bad, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I always do the same thing. I did my last like live show like in 2020 was like in November, and I was closing the show, and I was up to an hour and 15, and I was like, I think I should really get going. And they were like, no. So I did like 10 more minutes, and like I bombed one joke towards the end. And everybody goes, wow, that was the greatest show I've ever seen you do. I'm like, yeah, but you heard that new joke that bombed, right? Like, I was just focusing on that for like 4 days afterwards.
Yeah, it's like the one person in the crowd that's not laughing. So
I focus on those people all the time.
I think it's just inherent in comedians.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tom, you're an interesting guy. You have an interesting background. Tom, besides being a comedian, like later on in life, he winds up becoming a lawyer. So what were you like as a kid? What were you like growing up? Where did the whole Tom McCaffrey story start?
Wow, you guys really go deep on this thing.
Listen, we don't screw around on this show.
Yeah. I'm like, I grew up in Manhattan.
No, we want first tell us how you were conceived. Manhattan.
Let's see. My dad was Michael Douglas. No, it's funny. I was born in Southampton, Long Island, which sounds kind of hoity-toity, because I was born during the summer, and my parents were there. And then, but I grew up in Manhattan, and I grew up in the 80s here, and when it was bad still here. Like, people don't, a lot of people don't realize or remember, I guess, that it was bad here. Like, it was, even Manhattan was bad.
Dinkins era.
Like right before that. Wasn't Dinkins like 1991 or 1989 or something? Or 1990, I think.
So it was before Dinkins. Was it that was at the end of the Koch era?
Yeah, it was Koch when all during the 80s. And then it was it was just really, and as a kid, I was funny young. Like I do remember like knowing I was funny very young. Like in class, like in school, people were always like, "Oh my God, you're so funny." And I remember specifically, I think I was like 6 when I like first told a joke and killed in front of people.
And where did you start stand up? Like, was it a mic that you first went to? And how old were you when you did it?
I did stand up for the first time in college. I went to college in Dallas, Texas. And then I was taking an acting class, and I was 19, and the professor gave us an assignment one day. And I had thought about doing comedy young. I wanted to be like an actor. I was into movies young. And I wasn't really into like stand-up. I was into like Bill Murray and stuff like that. Like, I was more into like people in movies who were funny.
Did you do sketch or improv?
No. So like what I wanted to be an actor because I went to, LaGuardia Performing Arts High School.
Of course
I went there for high school. And that kind of got me like, I had always like thought about maybe being in showbiz, but like when I went there, I was like, oh, like there were kids there who were like into it. And like people from there became famous. So like when I went to college, I was taking an acting class, and one of the assignments was we had to do a stand-up act. And so I did it and like did well. And the teacher was like, "Oh man, you're really good at that. Like you should do stand-up comedy." And then he was like, "I want to take you to like open mic." So I went to an open mic in Dallas. And
did he tell you to stop acting?
What?
Did he tell you to stop acting?
No, but like I think he thought it was okay. But I think it was like I think I was like a pretty good actor, but I was really good at this, I think, because I was, even when I acted, I mean, the things I wanted to do were like comedy things, you know what I mean? So I think I was just scared of stand-up. Like I did it in Dallas and I kind of did okay, but I was so scared. My stage fright was I still have bad stage fright, but I didn't do it again for like 6 years. And then the next time I did it was in Manhattan at the comic strip. I took a bringer, I took a class where you had to do a bringer at the end of the class.
With DB Sweener?
With DF Sweedler.
DF Sweedler.
Were you about to say DB Sweeney?
I didn't know what the fuck his name was. I haven't seen him in over a year. Sean, do you know these guys?
No, I did like 2 bringer shows once in New York, and like I had to bring 10
Steve Aaron show.
No, I won't say this woman's name because she's a raging twat, but I had to bring 10 and I brought 9 to the Laugh Factor, to the Laugh Lounge. And she pulled me aside like right before I went on stage. She was like, "I don't know what kind of gall you have to think that you could perform tonight. If you brought 9 people, you're supposed to bring 10. And she was like scolding me. And I was maybe 6 months in at the time. And I was like, you know what? I got to change my path with this, because I'll punch somebody right in the fucking face if they ever talk to me like that again. And that was the last time I ever did a bringer show.
Yeah, I remember having a lot of rough experiences like that early on. It was just like shocking how horrible people were.
It's just
like, that's crazy. Like you bought 9 people and they're like, "You fucking bastard."
On a Tuesday at like 6:00 in the middle of the Lower East Side.
How many people were in that room that night?
I brought 9, so there was probably 15.
Yeah, this is the industry that we choose. Right.
Yes, this is the life path that we've chosen.
It would have been a way better show if there had been 16 people.
I think so too. I think that threw off the whole dynamic of the room. That's what it was. It was the odd number.
Even numbers. That's right. So did you let you go up?
Yeah, but I took a minute off my time too.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, God.
I once did one, and I think I was supposed to bring 5. And I only brought 3. And so they were only going to give me 3 minutes. So he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to light you at 2 minutes." And I was like, "Did you really just say that? Like, seriously, to a person?"
I hate people like that.
You're going to light me at 2 minutes? Like, the show can go 2 extra minutes.
No, man. These are professional shows. These 6:00 shows, if you go that extra 2 minutes, I mean, it could ruin everything. It could ruin the show. You understand that? Yeah.
I remember I just did my time. I just went over the light. I was like, "Fuck this." That was kind of my moment of like, I'm never doing this again. I just was like, I just won't do comedy anymore.
No, I was like, I'm going on the road. That was it. So I learned how to become a host, and I just hosted everywhere I possibly could that would take me.
That's actually a good way to do it. You're on stage the most. Everyone gets to know you. You're thinking right off your dome. What was your most awkward moment in comedy, Tom?
Jesus Christ. Awkward or just really bad? Like,
well, I think they're 2 different things. So
they are.
I think awkward.
Awkward. Well, I feel like I've had a lot of awkward moments in comedy. I had one where I had this thing where this wasn't really awkward, but it was like I had this weird week where every show I did, in the middle of my set, Jim Gaffigan walked into the room.
Is that Eastville?
No, it was like at different places. Like it was like 3 times in 1 week. One time was at UCB. One time was at Gotham, downstairs at Gotham. One time was like stand up New York. But it was just like it like threw me off every single time. So it was like it sucked because I'd be killing, and then Jim Gaffigan would walk in, and I would just like get really tense, and then it was. All I could think of was Jim Gaffigan was there. And I was like, I just started to do badly. You know what I mean? So it's weird. I think that happens to me a lot. Like because comedy is all about like being relaxed, and it's you're trying to be relaxed in the most uncomfortable situation. So I think I'm really good, but I can get really awkward when I get in my head. You know what I mean? Like if you get too in your head, you're just kind of like, you like when you start thinking about the timing, it's just, that's when I get really awkward on stage.
So what do you do to combat that?
I used to drink, but I don't drink anymore. And which was kind of I had to kind of like learn how to do stand up without, I didn't have that cushion, but I think it's just I don't know, you have to be prepared for it, and you have to, do as much stage time as you can so that you've like run into every situation like that. Just be as relaxed as you can. And if it's going, but not like go up with no expectations, you know what I mean? Because it's always whenever I do sets where I'm like, I have to do well right out the gate. I have to do well. I won't do well. But if I go up and I'm like, who gives a shit how I do? Like immediately, like I'll do well. You know what I mean? Because the audience can it's like you asked about awkwardness. It's like the audience can really tell if you feel awkward, and it just makes them feel bad.
When you had a Comedy Cellar audition, right?
Yeah. Did I tell you about this?
Yes, but I think it's an interesting story, and I think
interesting is one way to say.
Well, for our listeners, I mean, it's the place to get past in New York City, and so for like a guy like you who's kind of like laid back, and now you gotta, did you put pressure on yourself, or what'd you do to try to alleviate, or did nerves just overtake you?
Well, what happened with that, this was in like 2005, 2006, probably like 2006. And it was like a big club at the time, but it wasn't like what it is now. Cause you know how like it just became, in the last like 8 years, it's just become like the Amazon of comedy.
Since Louis pretty much has done
it's just kind of like, I feel like, other clubs are good, but it's very like, it's the Cellar and then everywhere else, right. And back then it was sort of like that, but they only had the one room. And, what's funny is like, I didn't ask anyone to like get me an audition there. Kurt Metzger had just gotten past there, and he liked me, and he contacted me, and he was like, hey man, you got to do the Cellar, you kill, I think you should do it. And I'm going to recommend you. And I was like, all right. And then he set it up. And then I went there, and like Kurt wasn't even there the night I went there. Like, and then I heard later that, people who recommend you, like they usually are there, and they introduce you to Esty, and they're like, hey, this is the guy and you should da-da-da. But he wasn't there. And I remember it was like everyone was like really mean. Like no one wanted me there. Like the host wouldn't even,
was it William Stevenson?
It wasn't him, but it was someone like that I don't really know, but he just was like, I could tell. I was like, no one wants me to be here. No one. And it sucked that Kurt wasn't there, because Kurt would have been the guy in my corner. You know what I mean? He would have been like introducing me to people.
Show you around. So you walk in, I guess upstairs, you're in the olive tree, and there's all the big comedians are sitting around, like the famous.
No, I was just actually outside, because like I saw Esty, and the thing that's annoying about it is it wasn't like I was like, I got to get in the Cellar. I got to get in the Cellar. Like, please, someone get me in. Like, I was like, the alt scene was big at the time, and I was like in the alt scene. I was considered kind of like an alt comic at the time. People would always say like, well, at the end of the story, like something happens with that. So like, I was outside, and I was like, hey, you're Esty, right? Like Kurt said I should come here. Yeah. And like, she was like, oh yeah, you'll go on in like 2. And the host I went up to, and I was like, hey, I think I might be next. And he was just like, I don't know. And he like walked away, and I was kind of like, I was trying to like tell him my name and stuff, or like maybe, it's usually like how it goes with the host. They're usually like, hey, what's your name? And like, what do you want me to say? And here's the light. And so he wouldn't talk to me. And then he like brought me up. He got my name wrong, and he hadn't told me where the light is. And I did like pretty good. I think I was supposed to do like 5 minutes. Like I did like, well, I didn't like destroy. I wasn't like, oh my God, I killed, but I like did fine. Like I had a pretty good set, you know what I mean? And like I did as well as the person who went on before me. And then I went upstairs, and she was like, yeah, I can't pass you. You like you did 15 minutes. You went like 10 minutes over the light. And I was like, and I'm very aware of like how long I do, like I always want to get off stage. Like if I'm doing well and they give me the light, I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm not one of those like, hey, let's keep going. Like I'm like, let's end this as fast as possible. So if I'm doing an audition, I want to get out of there, because I was doing pretty good. So like, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I did go that long. She was like, no, well, you went at least like 15 minutes. I was like, yeah, I didn't do that. And she was like, well, I can't pass you because you went long. And I was like, okay. And then I just felt like, I just felt like really shitty about it. And I was outside. I remember Dave Attell was there, and like I, was a huge Dave Attell fan. And he came up and like introduced himself to me, and like he was like, hey, what's your name? And I was like, Tom. And he was like, he was smoking. I was like, can I have a cigarette? Because I just felt so awkward with Dave Attell there. And he goes, oh, Tom, do you think you like earned a cigarette like after what happened in there? And I was like, oh, fine. And he was like, oh no, I'm just kidding, man. And he gave me a cigarette. And then later I heard someone was like, I think it was my friend Ari Shafir. He was like, yeah, I heard you just did like all your alt stuff. Like when you did your audition. And I was like, what does that even mean? My alt stuff? Because at the time there was a big kind of were
you a big Creek in the Cave guy?
No, I mean, I did do Creek in the Cave, but it was like at the time it was like UCB was becoming big, and this place where Fifi was like a huge spot for the alt scene. There was a lot of big shows there, and that was on 11th Street and like between 1st and 2nd, and that closed like 2009. And so I would do like, I would do all the alt rooms, mainly because when I first moved to the city, I couldn't get into the clubs. I tried to, and they just weren't like, and then when that happened at the Cellar, I was like, fuck this place. I'm not going to like try and, what I mean? Like I never wanted to go back there because it seemed like they didn't really want me there. So I'm very like, if they don't want me somewhere, I just like, don't go there, And then what happened was, like they opened all these rooms, and then I think it became like a little easier to get in there. Like I feel like there was a time where like they were more open. I feel like when I auditioned, they were very like the people who had been performing there for years, and they were very like protective of it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it was just kind of like it's just kind of a bummer of a night. So, and then like I would hear stories later about someone told me later, they were like, oh yeah, she like walked out of your set like 30 seconds into your set. And I was like, oh, okay.
Well, she probably knew you were an old comic.
I felt like later I really had no chance.
Did you wear a flannel shirt?
No, I wore like a sombrero and
eye patch.
What? An eye patch.
With an eye patch.
Well, see, the thing is, like,
a pogo stick.
I did do like the alt scene a lot, but I wasn't like, like I could do both. You know what I mean? I feel like the alt comic got a label of like, oh, they don't have any jokes. They just meander up there. But I mean, I have jokes. You know what I mean? Like I think the reason they like me in the alt scene is I was very kind of like loose and seemed unpolished, and they don't really like if you're too like, hey, I'm very like laid back. So I think that's why I kind of like, could kind of like transition into that.
I don't know what she looks for, because there are great comics. Like I never understood why guys like Dan St. Germain or Mike Lawrence never really got up there very much, or even were passed. I mean, if they did, it was very, very short amount of time, and maybe then they moved to LA. But I remember for the longest time, those guys weren't passing. You see people who I thought were like, just not as ready as those guys were. And
I think I knew a lot of people that got past there, and then they'd be like, oh yeah, they just stopped giving me spots. I think it's just like very.
A lot of comics we know tell that same story, Sean.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's just kind of, and back when I auditioned, it did feel like a different kind of era of it, because now it's like I've been by there in the last like few years, and it's weird. Like when I go there, I know like almost everyone there now, because it's like all these comedians that kind of came up around my time. So I'm not like sore about it, but it always feels a little, you've been in there, right? It always feels a little weird, like being in there,
Thanks
like
to Rick Chrome, I've been able to perform on that stage like 4 times, and then I hosted his roast around the corner at the Village Underground.
Yeah, so it's like, but you know what I mean? Like when you're in there, it's very like, it kind of reminds me of like there's like a hierarchy you can kind of feel there,
Oh yeah, it's a definitely like a fraternity sorority kind of thing. Like if you're not in that little clique, They don't want you in there.
Yeah, it's weird. And like, it's weird because I think I've been there a few times in the last like 5 years, and everyone's always nice to me, but I always feel like I feel like the new kid at school or something, you know, where you just don't know where to sit at lunch. Yeah. I'm very like, okay, am I allowed to sit here? So
it's a weird vibe. Like I was doing a podcast upstairs. They had that little podcast studio upstairs. And so I was doing one of Bobby Kelly's podcasts, and I was downstairs hanging out, and I know it was Chappelle, Chris Rock, Attell, and I don't remember who the other person was. And they were all
Voss.
No, it wasn't him, douchebag. But it was just they were all just sitting around, and I go to Bobby, I'm like, why aren't these guys on stage? And they go, they all got bumped. I'm like, who the fuck bumped Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock? And they goes, John Mayer. Yeah. I'm like, you're talking about probably two people that are on the Mount Rushmore of comedy, and a fucking blues guitar player who wants to riff for a half an hour talking about how he banged Jennifer Aniston. He's gonna bump the freaking guy. It's just a weird thing, and it
has such a mystique now too that like has been put on it. You know what I mean? It really is like a good example of like people make something really powerful because like that. I don't know, just like when you go in there, you can just, there's like an energy you can feel. It's like, wow, this place is like, it's kind of intimidating, right? It's just sort of an intimidating place. I mean, like, the few times I've been in there, I always feel like, oh man, but I'm like that at a lot of places, like almost everywhere I go, but not as extreme as it is there. It's So I feel like it was one of those things where like I probably auditioned too early. But I guess what was annoying is like Metzger was the guy who like pushed me to do it. He like contacted me, so that's kind of what always sort of like annoyed me. And then I remember he called me after. He's like, "So what happened?" I was like, "Oh yeah, she didn't pass me." He's like, "Okay, whatever." And I was like, "Oh, well."
And then he stopped talking to you.
No, he was fine. Like he was always really, really nice to me. Like I had known him at that point, like 3 years, and he was, he did the clubs a lot, and I would see him at club shows, and he was always like, "Why are you doing this? You know, these alt rooms. You need to do like the clubs. You know, you need to get in the club." And I was like, "Yeah, well, you know, I've done some of them. They don't really, you know, they don't put me on that much." He's like, yeah, and he would. I did the road with. It's funny too. I did the college with him around that time, and he opened for me. That's kind of like a funny thing. The fact that Metzger was opening for me. That's like the entire story of my comedy career. It's like I meet people, and they're like, "Hey, you're great," and then they become famous.
Yeah, I wish that would happen to me because I know you.
Yeah,
and that hasn't happened to me.
I can't. Not everyone, but it's happened a lot. Yeah, it's definitely happened. Like I've met like a lot of people who are like, "Hey man," like who I didn't know who they were because they weren't famous yet, and then they'd introduce themselves to me, and then they'd become like hugely famous.
Sean, have you ever tried doing an alt room?
Oh yeah,
you've done alt rooms.
Yeah, I did one in Brooklyn one time, and I think it was actually
Sean is a New Jersey Bayonne comic. He's half Irish, he's half Italian, and he's always angry. Okay, see him in an
so how did that? How was it?
Males.
So basically, Mike Lawrence berated me after I walked off stage. Like it was just exactly. He was just like, wow. I guess there's like smell of Drakkar coming off from this Italian angry guy, right?
What year was that?
Oof, early on. So I got to figure, what is this? 2021. Probably like 2010, maybe 2011.
Yeah, because like that was around when I wasn't even living in New York at that time. Like Mike Lawrence kind of came after me because they all seemed like, to me, it sort of ended when this place Rafifi closed around 2009. It was still around, but it felt like it was very
Tom,
like
who
disparate.
Were the comics that hung around Rafifi?
It was like Greg Johnson, Eugene Merman, and Bobby Tisdale had a show called Invite Them Up that became really popular. And Comedy Central actually did like a compilation CD of the Invite Them Up show that I actually was on. So that was, and like Dimitri Martin was on it. Like that Invite Them Up is kind of is a good kind of like time capsule of that, the alt scene at that time. It's like Birbiglia, Dimitri Martin, David Cross was on, and it was like Kumail showed up around that time, and Hannibal, Nick Kroll. Like me and Nick Kroll were kind of in the same class. Like when I started, it was Nick Kroll was just starting too. And
that's a great class.
What the fuck has he ever done, right?
I know. I can't figure it out.
I think he's still doing mics now. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I saw him like in LA a couple of years, and he was, like he and I started around I had been doing comedy like a few years, but not in New York. Like I'd done comedy like 6 months, and then I went to LA for 2 years, and then I came back, and it was kind of good because I was pretty good at it, but no one knew me. You know what I mean? So that was kind of a good situation to be in, because like, you can tell when people like don't know you, but you can tell they think you're good, because they always ask you a couple of questions. Like I would go up and they'd be like, how long have you been doing it? That was always the first question. Yeah. And then the next one is, how old are you?
Yeah, I've got
those are the two, like, I'm
feeling you out. Think like you're bigger than you really are. Like when some of these newer comics, they think like that you're bigger than you really are.
Me? Or
have you ever, it's just for both you guys, have you ever gotten that? Like sometimes you'll do like some of these like, produce shows, and it'll be a comic who's maybe been doing it like 2-3 years, and like you go up and you do great. Yeah. And then they think like, holy shit. Like they're looking at you like you're Ray Romano.
Yeah, but I've also had the opposite too. Like when I first started, I saw all these guys and I was like, wow, these guys are amazing comics. And I'm like, then I look back like 5 years later when I'm doing the fucking Borgata, and these guys are still doing a Moose Lodge in fucking Lake Apacon.
You know, I love doing a fucking Moose Lodge in Lake Apacon. I kill that right now. Those are my favorite shows. Tom,
go ahead.
I can't say the guy's name because the guy's a bit of a cock, but do you remember the guy who was going to sue Alan Fuchs? Do you know that?
I know the story. I don't know who that was though, but I do remember that. So why? Because he wrote something on social media.
Yeah, he was a troublemaker, this guy, and it made me think about what Sean said. Like the first night I ever went up and did stand up, I was like, wow, this guy he must be some heck of a comic. He's the host. He's the host of the open mic. If I could only be the host of the open mic, I was like, I would have made it in comedy. And like the guy,
don't worry, one day you will, Jeff.
Yeah,
this guy turns out to be the worst comic of all time. No, I'm holding on to that dream, and I'm hoping to one day be the open mic host.
I do remember someone early on, like not early on, like I'd done a few things, and like, but I, whatever. And I did a college show, and this comedian he went to the college, and we went to his like dorm afterwards. We were all like hanging out. And he kind of had he had us all back there. And I was like, can I use your bathroom? And he was like, oh man, Tom McCaffrey is going to urinate in my toilet. And I was like, what?
I'm going to save that urine.
And then that guy became like sort of famous, sort of.
Who was he?
It was Scott Rogowski. Do you know who that is? He was the
of course. No, I don't have no idea who Scott Rogowski is.
He hosted this trivia app. What's it? HQ Trivia? Do you remember that?
Oh yes. And you know what? Matt Richards, City Comic, wound up getting the gig right after him. Of course, I remember Scott Rogowski.
So yeah, Scott Rogowski actually produced my first solo album called Lou Diamond Phillips ? He was another. I mean, from that story, you can tell he was like a fan of mine because he like was doing stand up. And
what's the reason behind the name of the CD?
Because one of my punchlines on it is I go, Lou Diamond Phillips, like I say like a question, and people always kind of like, well, yeah, they always will name their CD kind of after one of their punchlines.
Right.
I wanted it to be kind of like the weirdest punchline name. Okay. So I kind of wanted people to be like, why is it named that? You know what I mean? So
I was actually going to name mine Gaga Bieber Spears because I wanted it to pop up on all the iTunes.
Yeah. This was like 2008. And I think I had been thinking of it. And then I saw Todd Barry at a show, and he was like, hey man, yeah, I heard you're recording an album. I'm like, yeah. He's like, what are you going to call it? And I go, I'm thinking like Lou Diamond Phillips. And he laughed. He goes, you should do that. And then he like walked away. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll do it.
That's great.
If Todd Barry says it. And then actually, so like that year when it came out, Laugh Spin or this online magazine, they did like the top 10 comedy albums of the year, and it was on that list, and Louis CK was on it. And like I had gotten into stand-up because I'd seen Louis CK do like stand-up on Conan. I didn't know who he was, and like so that was like a huge deal to me, you know what I mean? Like, I got on this list with the guy that was like the reason I started finally doing stand-up. So that was like a highlight. So Scott Rogowski, shout out.
Okay, right. And you urinated in his dorm room, and
yeah. I remember when he said like that was one of the, I was like, wow, this guy really like thinks I'm funny. This guy's really easily starstruck.
Right, like he actually met like a star. Like
I know he would have just.
Like,
well, then it was funny. He did the HQ trivia with like, and he would have co-hosts like The Rock and like,
yeah,
you know what
that
I mean?
Wouldn't faze him. That would be fun.
I know. Yeah, no, he was on like he was a guest on Colbert, like not even like doing stand up, like a guest, and I'm like, what was that like? You know what I mean? I actually think
I very rarely ever get starstruck because in our business, you do meet a tremendous amount of people. And probably about 10 years ago, my buddy was doing a wrestling documentary. So we go up to Connecticut to shoot some stuff. And it was like an independent show. And Ric Flair's son, who had passed away, a couple of years later, was just getting started. So I'm holding the camera, I'm standing on the stage, and like they're just about to do a Star Spangled Banner. And I look to my right, and Ric Flair is right next to me. And I just went, oh, like I couldn't believe it. And he goes to me, he puts his arm around my shoulder. He goes, I know, man. Every time I hear it, I get choked up too. I'm like, I know, right? It was one of those weird fucking.
And you're a big wrestling guy?
Yeah.
Okay,
so that's kind of like the greatest of all time to
and that would be the biggest. That would be the biggest person to you
in that field. I mean, yeah, but like there's very few times I ever got starstruck. It was that and Slash when I met Slash from Guns N' Roses, and that was kind of the same kind of thing. I kind of lost all the ability to talk.
Oh, really?
When I met him, yeah, because I think he kind of thought like I was like a Make-A-Wish kid or something like that.
Yeah, he probably couldn't talk either.
Well, he's also like a foot shorter than me too. So here's this like towering dude over this little miniature guitar player, and he's like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And I just went, "Ugh."
How did you meet him?
After a concert.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so after a show, he was outside just hanging out and signing autographs and stuff, and I just happened to be there, and I just totally fucking freaked out.
Yeah, I don't really get. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, who's the biggest guys that you guys met, but like didn't phase you?
Just in like celebrity.
Yeah. Like maybe you worked with them, you maybe did something with them. Like,
I met Vince Vaughn like a couple of times, and I like kind of hung out with him. And I was a huge Swingers fan. Like, I still love that movie. But like when that came out, I loved, and I thought he was I thought he was hilarious. I wasn't like a big like, oh, I love this celebrity, but I really liked it. I thought he was really good. And then like 2 years after Swingers, I like met him and like, cause through a friend, and like I hung out with him, and he like knew my name and stuff. And
how did he know your name?
I mean, what I mean is like, I met him, my friend was friends with him. So like I went to go meet them, and he was like, oh, hey, Tom, like my, so-and-so told me you do stand up, so.
Well, he was just a big stand up guy. Didn't he bring a bunch of comics like Gary Goldman?
Yeah, he was like he was really into comedy. He told me he did like a
roundup.
Well, that was later, but he said he did improv in Chicago with like Del Close. That was when I met him. He told me that because he was into the fact that I was a stand-up. I'd like been doing comedy like a year and a half, and I remember he was like, yeah, man, like, yeah, you're gonna do any shows? Like, let me know and I'll come. And I was like, all right, Vince Vaughn. Like, I mean, the shows I was doing weren't good. And then I think I did invite him to a show, and he didn't end up going, but there was like 9 people at the show. I can't believe
that. No way. No, but like, how embarrassed would you have been if 9 people at the show?
I was so glad he didn't show up. I would have been like humiliated. So, that was what's annoying is like when you meet a celebrity, what annoys me about it is like you can't say anything. You know what I mean? Like you have to just pretend like it's normal or else you're weird. You know what I mean? Like you have to just be like the fact, like he was pretty big at the time and I had to just be like, oh, hello, nice to meet you. Like, you know, and just kind of like not be like, hey, I couldn't even be like, hey man, I'm like a fan of yours. Cause it just was like me and him and another guy. So it was just like, I had to just be like, yeah, this is totally normal. Like, this is my life. That's what I don't like about being. And the guy that I got the most starstruck with, where I kind of couldn't talk, was of all people, was Ted Danson.
That's a larger than life kind of guy, though. You know
what?
Ted Danson.
That's kind of like a larger than life guy because like that's from our youth. Like Cheers is one of the biggest shows of all time. I
think that's what it was. I think the fact that like, because I mean, I like Cheers a lot, but I never was a huge Ted Danson fan. But it was weird seeing this guy who had been in that's like the power of TV when they're in your like living room for like 10 years. It feels so strange. You know what I mean?
How much does he get paid? How much does Ted Danson get paid?
Like now, I don't probably nothing, but like on the show, I think he was getting like $100,000. Like
why don't we get $100,000? Why Ted Danson? Why not us?
Because he like makes money for
talent.
But Ted Danson.
Well, I met Henry Winkler. It was kind of the same thing. I met him at like one of those like, you know, autograph horror conventions. And like Fonzie was like everything for me growing up. Like I was a huge Happy Days fan. And when I met him, he was just like the sweetest little old Jewish grandfather. It was like the complete opposite of Fonzie. He was like, hi, how are you today? Just very calm and sweet and kind, you know. You almost want him to be a little bit of a prick.
Yeah,
to keep that.
He whenever I see him in interviews, you always see him. He's so opposite Fonzie.
It's so chill. I mean, I met Gene Simmons one time, and I thought like he would be like a real raging asshole.
I love Gene Simmons,
but he was so cool. Like he was like, I was like, I'm a fan. He goes, "What's your favorite song?" And I go, "Unholy." He goes, "Great song. I wrote that." You know, just being like really chill and stuff like that, and taking pictures, you know, graciously and stuff like that. But some people are real dicks.
I've had a lot of, where they're, but I kind of like get it. As I've gotten older, I get it because it's like, I don't know. It must be, you know, the older I get, the more I look at like, if you're famous, it must be like super annoying, you know, because like everyone's just annoying you kind of all the time. And
I get it. You know, like I saw, I was out in LA a couple of years ago on Halloween and I got tickets to see Marilyn Manson at the Roxy. So it's a tiny little place, 400 people maybe. And Johnny Depp's playing guitar for him that night. He just decides to show up and play guitar for him because they're friends. So he goes next door to the Rainbow, which is outdoors. It's wide open. And he has a little rope around his two little chairs. Like,
really?
I'm like, all right, dude, like at least go inside or go upstairs.
That's what I would do. That's a boss move. I would do that.
Christ.
I once did when I lived in LA, I did this bringer at this like club, like kind of off the strip. And it was like an early show. Like it was like 7:00, you know, a nightclub that opened at like 10. And it was just like, they did the show like in this side room near like all these like couches and stuff. And it was just like a bringer show. And actually Brian Callen was hosting it. And they were like, hey, you guys can stay in the club after the show because you're already in here. And I didn't, and I was like, oh, I guess this is like a cool club. So we stayed. And then like they had roped off right where the show had been. After the show, they put like a place card of who was going to sit in that section. And they had the Prince symbol you remember when Prince had he turned his name into a symbol?
Yeah, I have it tattooed right there.
Oh, really? So they were like, I don't know if they were like having a party for him. And that was the section that was roped off for Prince to be hanging out in, where the open mic was. And so I was basically like at Prince's party, like by default, just because I had done a bringer show in the area where it was going to be. And I think we waited for like 2.5 hours, like till like 10:30, and he didn't show up, so we just left. But it was so weird because no one was like, "Hey, what are you doing here? You can't like be," you know what I mean? It was just people just assumed we were like there, that we belonged there.
That's going to be my next thing. I am going wherever I am next time. I'm putting like a rope around me. I'm just going to kind of like monopolize the room and sit there. All right, so we're at the point in the show now, Tom. We got to talk a little bit of music. This is a music show, and so I want to ask you. Your band is the Beastie Boys, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why the Beastie Boys? Why Mike D, MCA, the King Ad Rock? Why those guys?
I feel like the older I got, especially when MCA died, I kind of was like, MCA when he died, I think is the only celebrity I ever cried about dying.
That was a really, really hard one for me too.
And I think it wasn't because
sad.
It wasn't like because I was like, oh, MCA, I miss it. It was more because it was like the official death of my childhood. You know what I mean?
I get that.
It represented like this huge thing that shaped me being gone. Like that was such a huge thing for me.
I totally get, and I think too, part of it was because he actually had cancer. He wasn't like a typical rock star who like OD'd or, drank himself to death. Like he was like legit sick. Yeah, I can remember exactly where I was when I heard that. I was at a Walgreens parking lot. I did the same thing. I welled up really, really quick when I think
I cried like later that when I heard about it, I was like, oh yeah, that's right, he had cancer, and it didn't really. And then like, I don't know, I just was like alone that day, and I just remember I was like, I can't believe because I always hated when celebrities died and people were like, oh, and it was like, just relax, you can fucking know the guy.
Yeah,
but it more like the idea that there was no more Beastie Boys was like. It was just kind of like, when you watch like the Wonder Years where you're like, oh God, it's like my childhood is over. It's like it kind of puts it in focus that you're old.
That was the theme of that show.
Yeah, I've actually been rewatching that show because like
Still
it's on
holds
Hulu.
Up. Still holds
great
up.
show, and it's just like I cry all the time. It's because I think
you
it's like
cry while watching the Wonder Years.
What, you don't?
No.
All right. Well, some of us have a soul.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the Wonder Years. I mean, I'll cry watching Home Alone, but not the Wonder Years.
I always cry with Home Alone too.
With the old man, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? I never have cried at Home Alone.
I'll tell you my one.
Come on. Wait,
I'll tell you my one scene. My one scene is La Bamba at the very end when his brother runs up the hill and he goes, Richie. I've seen that movie 250 times. I've cried 200.
Underrated movie.
It's a great
Lou
movie.
Diamond Phillips.
Yeah.
See,
I met Lou Diamond Phillips.
Yeah.
He is one of the nicest. Yes. He is one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. He sent me a picture, with a great personal autograph. He wished me a happy Thanksgiving.
It's funny because I don't have anything against him. The joke I tell where I use him is I was kind of the joke is like I kind of refer to him as like a lame celebrity. It's basically like the joke is like Ray Liotta. I'll do it really fast. It's the gist of it. It's like Ray Liotta was adopted. He didn't know he was adopted till he was like in his late 40s, and he found his birth parents, and they didn't know. And I was like, that's got to be weird. Like you give a baby up for adoption, and then Ray Liotta shows up as your kid. And then I was like, it would suck if it was like a lame celebrity, like you open the door and you're like, Lou Diamond Phillips.
That's
like,
funny.
wow, I'm your dad. So like, I have nothing against him. Like he was good in La Bamba, but he later on, I feel like became sort of known as like kind of a mediocre-ish
like a has-been?
actor,
an infomercial actor.
He is not
just like cheesy kind of. When you think of him,
he didn't do anything cheap. What did he do? Is cheap. He did the Young Guns movies.
Those are horrible.
I mean, that was when he was doing pretty well. But I think he did like a sequel to like Hop and a Half or something.
No, he didn't.
He did something like that, like something really bad.
Yeah,
he did like bad movies later.
Stand and Deliver.
That was right after La Bamba, actually. So that movie makes me cry, actually. That's a and I actually met someone from that movie once, and like I wouldn't say I was starstruck, but I was like, I thought it was really cool. You know what I mean? This one. Did you see Stand and Deliver?
Is that the one with Edward James Olmos?
Yeah, I met the girl. Like there was a girl who's kind of like cute and like I think she looks like Latina in it, and she's like kind of quiet. And I met her because like my friend was friends with her. I've had that a lot where like like I have friends who are in the industry, and then all of a sudden some celebrity or some actor that I know will just show up to hang out with us, and I can't say anything. Like I can't be like, oh, you're the girl from Stand and Deliver. I just had to like hang out with her for like a night and just never mention it. And she died like 2 years ago.
Way to bring the show down, Tom.
I know, sorry.
So let's get back to the Beastie Boys now. Now after Tom was bringing up dead celebrity stories. So what was it? Was it Licensed to Ill that got you into the Beastie Boys, or was it Paul's Boutique? Like,
it was Licensed.
What era was it?
I was like, I grew up in Manhattan and I got into rap. I mean, I call it rap still because when it came out, when I got into it, it was called rap music. Like, and I feel really weird saying hip hop music. For some reason, I just feel like I'm too old to say hip hop. And so,
you are.
Yeah, it just feels dumb on me. Like it feels very white. So like, when I was in 6th grade and 7th grade, where, Run DMC had just released their first album and I got really into it. Like this guy from Hollis, Queens gave me that tape and I loved it. And so that got me into rap music. That was like the new music. And so I'd been listening to rap for like 2.5 years when Licensed to Ill came out. And so, I mean, I think I was like 14 when it came out. And I mean, I could not be any more the demographic for that album. I was like a white 14-year-old in Manhattan who liked rap music. I mean, like the Beastie Boys were made exactly for me.
Checked every box. Absolutely.
So like,
what was the first song you heard?
I mean, the first one was, the Fight for Your Right song. That was like the one that like blew them up. And also it was crazy to me because they were from Manhattan and then it was a big thing of like in the Fight for Your Right video, Ad Rock is wearing a Stuyvesant t-shirt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, he's
wearing this t-shirt actually.
Oh, shit.
Right.
There you go.
That's how much I'm into that. So like Stuyvesant was 5 blocks. That school was 5 blocks from where I lived. So I was like, holy shit. Like they were huge. It would be like the Beatles coming out and them wearing a shirt.
They were relatable to you.
Yeah. And I loved rap music. And that album is fucking amazing. You know what I mean? Because later,
it's still that best one.
And Fight for Your Right is like the worst song they've ever made. So like,
what's your favorite song off that album?
Maybe like Rhyming and Stealing. I think.
Dude, I agreed. First song off the album too. I love it.
Yeah, that and The New Style I like a lot. But almost every song on that is Hold It Now, Hit It. If you go down the line, like the only bad songs
are till Brooklyn.
That still holds, and that video is hilarious. You know what I mean? Like the only bad songs are Girls and Fight for Your Right. Those are the only like bad songs. And Girls isn't even that bad.
Girls isn't that bad. That's the worst song on the album. That's a killer album then.
Yeah. My favorite thing about the Beastie Boys is how, they blew up with that album, but every album after that just got consistently better and better and better.
They changed and they grew up. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, so then what happened, what clinched it was, so I loved that album. And then, they were always kind of thought of as like a fad, like they were like, oh, these guys are idiots. They just have one good album. And then they didn't come out with an album for like 2.5 years. Like Paul's Boutique came out in the summer of 89. And I remember it had been, like 2.5 years, which by that, when you're that young, that's like an eternity. Like I hadn't really thought of them. And a friend of mine, I was out in Long Island for the summer. A friend of mine had bought Paul's Boutique and I heard it and I was like, and it sounded weird. It didn't sound like Licensed to Ill. So I was like, well, what is this? This is them now? And they were like, and he was like, yeah, it's a new Beasties. And I was like, it sounds weird. Like they sound like their like voices changed or something. And he's like, no, it's better than the other one. I was like, all right. And then I bought it. And I started playing. I fucking immediately loved it. I thought it was so. And then it's kind of like a point of pride because I loved it immediately. And that album took years for people to get it. It bombed when it came out.
Oh, huge.
Everyone later. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I equate that album to Weezer's Pinkerton, where it's a masterpiece. But when it first came out, it was initially on everyone's hate list. And then 5 years later, it's one of the top 100 albums that you have to own. And I think that's the same thing with Paul's Boutique.
It's like, and that's why I'm always like proud that like, people are, because later it got like everyone started loving it, because they even say in interviews, they're like, now everyone's like, oh man, that's my favorite album. But like, it's kind of one of those things. I'm like, yeah, I liked it like from the beginning. You know, I know you liked it when like everyone started saying it was cool to like it. But I remember even then being like, God, have you heard this? And everyone's like, this is like weird. I don't, because it was so different than.
Well, Johnny Rydell, Hey Ladies, Shake Your Rump.
Well, like Shake Your Rump, it like starts so amazing, and then Eggman, and then Car Thief, I think is like one of their best songs, because it's such like a weird album because it has so many layers to it. You know what I mean? It sounds so different from the other album, which is literally just like one kind of like rock lick in each song.
Well, they really started to like write their own music at that point too, because they were musicians before they did the whole, rap thing. They were actually like a punk band when they first started.
Yeah.
Was it in like 98 for Hello Nasty where they actually toured by plane?
That was by Check Your Head. That was like when they first started.
Right.
That was like 94. No, like 92. 92, 93.
Ill Communication, right?
Ill Communication might have been the one where, because Check Your Head, they were
94.
Yeah. And so Paul's.
I was just gonna say they just grow every album. Like every album has a different sound to it. License to Ill to Paul's Boutique to Shake Your Head to Ill Communication, and then Hello Nasty. To me, those are the quintessential classic Beastie Boy albums.
Yeah,
and I think like each one of them, is uniquely different.
Oh, I agree.
And they've always been like this, like whenever they'd come out with an album, like sometimes I remember when Check Your Head came out, it was 92 and I was in college. And I think I was having like a rough time. I was going to college in Texas and I felt very like I wasn't fitting in Texas. And I remember Check Your Head came out and it felt very like, oh yeah, these guys, like it was like an old friend that I hadn't seen in a while. Like, that's what albums, when they came out with albums, felt. And I don't know, I always just felt like they were like so cool, like they were cooler than everyone else. And it was kind of cool that I saw that young, because they always had that attitude even from day one, because they were a punk band. So they had the punk rock attitude of like, we don't give a shit what anyone thinks. You know what I mean? They all, from day one, they were just like, you don't like me, I don't give a fuck. But that's why I like rap music so much in general. I really like that really resonated with me, the attitude of like, oh, you don't like me, well, I don't really give a shit because I don't like you, because that's kind of what got me with them out of the gate. And I just loved how they kept doing it. They kind of maintained that they were just like very genuine, you know what I mean? There's nothing like phony about them.
They're very, very authentic group. Did you ever see them live?
No, I never saw them live.
One of the greatest surprises I ever saw was them in concert. Like,
where'd you see them, Sean?
The Continental Arena. They did a whole theater like in the round. So they had the big circulars.
You want to know something?
And
I worked one of those shows, not at at Continental, at the Garden.
Yeah, it was so surprising, like because they played their own instruments.
Who supported them on that?
A Tribe Called Quest.
That's right.
Which is one of my favorite bands too. And I remember one of the memories I had was that they brought out Biz Markie, and like you think he's going to do Just a Friend, and you're like, oh, I'm going to hear this. All right, that's pretty cool. And they wind up rocking Benny and the Jets by Elton John, and Biz Markie sang it. And I just remember I was with this girl at the time. I'm looking at her and she's like, who's that? What's this song? And I'm like, you don't have any idea what the fuck you're watching right now. This is one of the craziest things you'll ever see in your entire life.
When you were at that show, it was in the round. It was festival seating. There were no chairs on the floor.
No, they were standing around the pit. Like
that's a fucking nightmare to work. I was working those shows in Madison Square Garden. And the problem with those shows, because Rage did the same thing when they toured with Wu-Tang, arenas would constantly lose the house, which means people were jumping down to get in. It was too overcrowded. At the Beasties, they had to call NYPD to get people back into the stands, because otherwise they would have had to shut down the show. It was
what tour was that? Like what album was
that? Was 98. That was Hello Nasty.
Well, I saw them on Ill Communication.
Okay, then
so it's like 94, 95.
Well,
when I saw
94, them. Weren't they on Lollapalooza?
Yeah, you know what? I had an opportunity to go to that and I didn't go. That was
'Cause I
like
went
my
to that.
chance to go see. I'm like, I can't believe I never saw them. It's such a
You know
fucking
what, Jeff? I
travesty.
think you're right. I think it was 98 now that I think, because I was working at a law firm then. So that's kind of what I remember.
I think it was too, because that was the Hello Nasty was the tour. I remember them being in the round.
And that's
Yeah,
when
I
they
think you're
also
right.
played their instruments.
Did
Well,
they
yes.
play it on that one? Because remember,
Yes.
I thought
On
Yeah.
Hello Nasty, they
oh,
absolutely
because
they played their
Hello
own
Nasty
instruments.
was when they got into like they all were wearing like the matching like jumpsuits, remember? And then they start kind of they had like choreography. That was another thing that was cool. They kind of would do that, like that, like they started doing weird different things. Like they all started dressing the same, and they had like choreography they had worked out.
Well, that video was insane for Intergalactic.
I mean, that song is so fucking good. And then the other thing I was going to say.
The greatest line ever written in a song is "I'll stir fry you in my wok." I could still just walk around and just say that line and smile 25 years later. I love that line.
That song almost broke up mine and my wife's marriage.
Okay.
Really? We were driving down to Cape Cod, and I must have played that song. I'd say from Staten Island to Cape Cod, I must have played that song easily 25 times, and she couldn't take it. And she goes, "One more time, I'm fucking leaving you. I can't take it." She hated the Beastie Boys.
Do you still think you made the right choice?
No, I would have just played it 26 times.
And I was going to say, like, you could have heard it one more time.
I loved that song.
Another thing about them that I loved, and like I realized later, was they were like funny. Like they were genuinely funny from out the gate. You know what I mean?
Sabotage video was a great video.
Yeah, like they were, and even like License to Ill era, they were like
right. Fight for your right. Do you like parties?
Yeah, they were funny, and they were like, and then the thing that's funny on Paul's Boutique is their lines on it are really funny. It's almost like borderline comedy. They're like, they were borderline like a comedy act. You know what I mean? At the beginning, because Lonely Island. Like I really like Lonely Island.
Yeah, so do I.
But like, they're not far off from the Beastie Boys. You know what I mean? They're doing it as a joke, but Beastie Boys were always kind of like,
I think
they weren't taken too seriously. But
Tom, I think when they get into Check Your Head, I think they're becoming a little bit more serious.
They do. They do. Yeah.
And I love, and you did a great parody of So What You Want on that video.
That and then Sure Shot too. Yeah.
Right.
Because I'm doing like underwater. Yeah.
But that's the one that I caught. That was the one that grabbed my attention when I saw you do So What You Want. Yeah,
I always loved that. I always wanted to get that down, that whole slow-mo rapping they did. Yep. It took me so long to figure out how they did that.
And it's really cool. And I love that Nick shirt that he's wearing in it.
And that was another thing. They were like, that was ahead of their time. Like it was very like the fact that they came up with that, like rapping in slow-mo somehow. Yeah, so.
And again, ill communications, Sabotage was another different direction. They're a little bit harder.
Yeah.
But you like the play on like it's almost like an homage to the like 1980s, 1970s detective shows.
Yeah, and it's funny. I actually don't like that song Sabotage that much. Like I think it's okay, but I prefer their rap when they rap. You know what I mean? And
you like Three Mics on One DJ?
Which album is that on? Is that
on?
It's
so white just saying that, Jeff. Do you like Three Mics and One DJ?
Is that on? Is that on Hello Nasty?
Yes.
Yeah, you know what? I like Hello Nasty, but it has so many songs. Like, there's a lot of songs I'm not that into, but there's a lot of songs I am into. It has like 20 songs on it.
Super Disco Breaking is another one. That's
pretty good. I think The Move is good. That's one I like. I like, that's not my favorite. What's funny is after that, I don't like, their next album after that, I don't like To the Five Boroughs.
Yeah. Neither do I.
That's a great
and I think they do like a remix.
Do you, that song?
I love that song. Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, and Staten, from the Battery to the top of man. Yeah,
that's like a good one.
Oh, and I'm white. And I'm white.
I'm nasally. Leave me alone.
But that album, it's like, that was the first sign of like, oh, I think they're not as good as they were. They're kind of like not as good as they were. Like I didn't get that into that album. And then the last album they made, the Secret Hot Sauce Committee.
I'm not a fan
one.
of that one.
I never got into that one. They did a song with Nas that was like pretty good. The Too Many Rappers.
I remember that one. That was okay. That was
like you could. They definitely like sounded older and were not as. That's kind of the.
It's starting to get a little bit more political.
I think that was the problem. Yeah, I think that was the problem with the To the Five Boroughs. To the Five Boroughs, and they even say that it was soon after 9/11, and they're kind of political, and it's a little like it doesn't really fit that. You know what I mean? It's like weird listening to the Beasties be like serious, serious.
Think about that compared to License to Ill.
And I know, yeah. So it's like
it's a complete evolution,
and it also kind of like reminded me like that I was getting old. I was like, oh, these guys who were like the funny, like didn't take anything serious or like kind of.
The documentary did that for me when I saw that. Was the last year. That's kind of what I did. You saw your whole evolutionary timeline going along with them as well.
Yeah, I loved that. I've watched that like 10 times.
Yeah, I had a weird chance meeting with them. Me and my brother and two other guys who were all friends. We were all working together, for Jerry Garcia, the guitarist from the Grateful Dead. And he was doing a run of shows on Broadway, and he was doing it for the month of October. And we worked all the shows, and after the shows, we'd be starving, so we'd stop off at Chinatown and go to WoHop. So one night we're in WoHop, and who walks in are the Beastie Boys, all three of them. And so I go to my brother, I go, Mark, and my brother is kind of, when he wants to be, he's kind of intimidating because he's a federal agent these days. Okay. So I go, Mark, he had that demeanor. I go, Mark, there's the Beastie Boys. Go, hey, Adam. Go, hey, Adam.
So you get two of them.
Right. So I didn't say a name. He's go, let's say Adam. Go, hey, Adam. So he goes, hey, Adam. Hey, Adam. And they all of them come over.
They came over?
Yeah. So Adam Yonch goes, how'd you know my name? So my brother goes, and just deadpan goes, we know what you look like. And now they don't know what to say. But we're all sitting there and we're all wearing the same shirt. We're all wearing these Jerry Garcia shirts. He's like, how come we all wearing Jerry Garcia shirts? I go, so I say, well, we just came from working with him. We've been working with him all month. He goes, wow, Jerry Garcia. Tell him Adam says, hey.
Yauk said that?
Yes.
What's funny is I remember there's an interview with Ad Rock where when they went to meet with the Capitol label head when Paul's Boutique came out, and they were like,
well, because they switched labels.
That's a big thing too. I don't know a lot of people know that, but they're like, I didn't know that until like not that long. I mean, they talk about it in the documentary, but I didn't know it.
Hold on a second, because Sean, I was working for the label at that time. I was my first job, Tom, out of college. You don't know this. I worked for CBS Records in the A&R department. Our listeners, I never tell the story, by the way. I was working for CBS Records, and one of our subsidiary labels was Def Jam, and then something happened between the band and Walter Yetnikoff, and they wound up shopping and going over to Capitol.
Yeah, and they said that when Paul's Boutique came out, Capitol wasn't pushing it at all, so they met with the head of the label, and he said to them, like, the guy was wearing like a tie-dye shirt, and he was like, "You guys, I totally get it. I'm a deadhead." And this is an interview I saw Ad Rock, and he goes, just FYI, I'm not a deadhead. I'm not a deadhead. So it's funny that you tell that story that you guys were wearing like Jerry Garcia shirts. Because I remember him specifically saying, but that reminds, so like I never saw MCA in person, but I came close to meeting Mike D and Ad Rock. So like I was doing a show in like 2002 down. It was like I just moved back to New York, and I was doing stand-up, and I was doing this open mic, and not really an open mic, a book show, but it was like a very small show. There was maybe like 15 people there. And Neil Brennan at the time was just starting stand-up because like he had done Half Baked, and he was a writer, and then he just moved back to New York, and he wanted to start doing stand-up, and he had to start kind of like at the bottom to learn how to do stand-up. So Neil Brennan was like kind of around. It was like me, Nick Kroll, and a few other guys, and we were all doing the same shows. And it was when they were developing Chappelle's show, and he showed up one night, Neil Brennan, to the show with Chappelle and Mike D, because Mike D's wife directed Half Baked. So that's like the connection. So there was like 15 people there, and it was like right before Chappelle's show came out, and like just Chappelle and Mike D are just in the audience at this like show where everyone on it has been doing comedy like 2 or 3 years. So I had to like go up in front of Chappelle and Mike D. It was just like the most surreal moment, you know what I mean? And I never got they left like immediately, so I didn't want to go up to Mike D and be like, hey man. So that was, and then Ad Rock, a friend of mine did a show once at Joe's Pub, and Ad Rock was like on the show, and I was talking to my friend backstage, like around the green room, and Ad Rock was there, but he was like surrounded by people, and I didn't want to like butt in, you know what I mean? And I remember I walked by a few times. He kind of looked at me like,
he's probably scared of you.
I was like dressed like exactly like him in 1994.
It was single white female syndrome.
And it was when I told you, like I rapped myself, like I released rap albums.
Yes.
And this is when I was doing that. They were funny. They were supposed to be funny, but I was kind of like, I wanted it to be good too. So
we're going to have to get you back in here to talk about the rap album. And we never got a chance to talk about your musical shorts or your shorts that were on Comedy Central. Yeah. Where can people find you, Tom? And what do you got going on in the future?
Well, I'm Instagram and all that. I'm on Instagram like Tom McCaffrey 722, and then at Tom McCaffrey Twitter. And I have a podcast called Last Exit to Brooklyn. You should do it sometime. And then and yeah, you guys should both do it. And then we just talk about pop culture and like movies and stuff. And I have a few albums on iTunes. I have a few stand-up albums, and then 2 rap albums. I know it sounds totally ridiculous, but
no, man. Listen, you got to branch out and you got to do different things. And we love our audience to go and find and check out Tom McCaffrey.
Yeah, my rap name was. I think my rap albums are under Tom McCaffrey. They're on iTunes, and under TMC was my rap name. And like Hannibal Buress is on my first album.
It's not that bad. I want to make fun of it, but I can't make fun of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing it that way. I was doing, actually Lonely Island was kind of what made me be like, yeah, I could do this. Cause like, I loved Lonely Island, and they, you can tell with them, they're like really big rap fans, but they also knew they couldn't just be like, I knew I couldn't be like a straight up rapper. It would be ridiculous. So I was kind of like, oh yeah, this is kind of a joke. But part of me was like, yeah, but it's not really a joke.
Wait, before we let you go, okay, please tell me in the videos you're not wearing sunglasses and then any one of your raps by going like this. Do you do that at all?
No, I was.
Thank God.
I'm trying to think what I would dress like. Sometimes I would kind of, dress over the top. Like I had a sweatshirt that said in the Run DMC, lettering, or like it looked like how they said Run DMC, but it said Run LES, like Run Lower East Side.
Did you wear your hat like sideways?
I had like I always was really into wearing hats. So I'd wear like a baseball hat. Sometimes I'd have like the ski hat, or I'd wear something to the side. It was when I was doing videos, I was very like emulating Beastie Boys videos. I was trying to do that slow-mo rap thing. It took me a little while to figure out the tech. It was harder. This was like 2010. It was harder to like figure out how to make videos at that point. Now it's like you can just do it on your phone. So
right now you can shoot a lot of stuff on your phone. All right, listen, folks. Tom McCaffrey, Instagram, Twitter. Check out his albums. Check out his rap albums. Things are opening up. You're going to see Tom in all the clubs in New York City. And Sean, anything before we go?
No, it was great meeting you, Tom. And,
great meeting you. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
A lot of fun today.
All right, folks. We will see you back. Have a great Palm Sunday, and we'll catch you guys next week. Take care, everybody.